Hey everyone, it's me, Arthur Kade, welcoming the hilarious Marc Maron to Behind the Velvet Rope. That is him. Season 4 of Marin premieres on IFC. And make sure to check out, of course, his WTF podcast, one of the funniest things out there. Hey everyone, it's me, Arthur Kade. All right, Marc Maron, just finished telling you, huge fan. Love What the Fuck broadcast. I guess I could say What the Fuck, why not?
Can you?
Sure, why not? If I'm sitting with you, I've got to. WTF, What the Fuck, whatever. Love your show, man. Entering season 4, congratulations. And I already read some of the previews for season 4. It looks like it's going to be a heavy drug descent for this season, right?
Sure, yeah. The character of Marc, not the real Marc, falls off the wagon kind of drastically at the end of season 3. And season 4 of Marin starts with him sort of picking up where he would be if he was off the wagon for a year on opiates. So it's not a pretty picture, though it's funny, dark but funny. I'm now living in a storage unit, which is a little different. So I'm not doing my podcast in a garage. I'm living in an actual garage. And we sort of take it from there. But it's subject matter-wise, it's heavy, and we treat it with the respect due to addiction and recovery. But we do find some pretty funny stuff in there.
I've got to imagine that as a comedian and as a writer, that's got to be the most fun you're going to have with a character like that, where you're like, all right, on the downward spiral part, we're going to really just tank this up and have fun.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can, because it's a whole world that's very specific and it's not so done that much. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't sit here and go like, oh, let's count the number of weird drugged out comedies there are or rehab comedies. So the first section of this new season, the first few episodes, all takes place in rehab. And it was nice to be untethered from my real life and create sort of a cautionary tale that we hope doesn't happen. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but I think maybe living through it with the character would be enough for me to realize that we don't want that to happen.
I can't wait till we see TMZ next week. It's like Marc Maron hooked on horrible stuff. You're like, I have the quote, I have the soundbite.
You do. He said he wasn't going to do it. Now look at him. He's a mess.
How much of the fictional character is actually derived from the real life Marc Maron?
Well, I'm not really good at pretending too much. So, certainly in the first 3 seasons of the show, we drew a lot from my real life and a lot from the relationships in my real life. And this season, this hasn't happened to me. What happens in this new season of Marin, but the character is grounded enough, and it is me enough. I think emotionally, I'm very similar. I think obviously, I have a whole life outside of these 22-minute episodes, but they're relatively true to who I am.
You've had such a fascinating career because we see so many comedians who they skyrocket within 6 months to a year.
I'm so glad I didn't do that. Yeah. Who wants that? Skyrocketing.
But you've had a great career. I mean, you've grinded, you've made things happen. It's kind of, in my mind, the perfect description of this is what this business really is. When you look at your career, what comes to mind? Like, what are the thoughts to describe your career?
Well, I didn't know how to do anything else in my mind. There was no other real other trajectory. There's no, like, when it really came down to it before I started the podcast, where nothing was really going well and I was on the verge of bankruptcy. I used to do a bit about Plan Bs. I never had one and I never really thought about it, because there's that moment where you're 45 and you're like, well, screw this. I could always, wow.
What else am I gonna do?
Yeah.
I'm going to be homeless.
So, I think to characterize a career, I'm very fortunate in that, somehow or another, my cosmic timing and my skill set and my, my persistence and just the sort of desperation that led to the podcast sort of opened up this whole new world for me and for the medium and for, for people to kind of see, what I can do.
You were one of the first, especially to understand the power of the podcast and how social media can work. And now you've had everyone from President Obama on there. You just had, I was telling you, the Louis C.K. interview. He's so hard. I've been on a million red carpets. You never see Louis C.K. So to have him sit down for an hour and a half is pretty freaking awesome.
Well, we're old friends, and certainly there's a few people over my life that I've become, Louis and I are close. And I think, he wanted to talk about that Horace and Pete project specifically, and and he wanted to do it with me. That was nice. And I like that people come over and do the show. But oddly, I really, for the long form interviews, I only do people once. Yeah, he was really the only one I did twice, to actually do 2 separate hours. And I think the first interview we did, we broke into 2 parts, but that was one interview. But he's the only one I did twice.
Why is that? What was it about him and his story, and just it was the friendship, or was it?
Well, yeah. Well, he'd come over like to do a little. He plays a little part in the first episode of Marin this new season. Like he's the voice on the phone. That's actually Louis' voice on the phone. I wanted him to actually be in the show, but he didn't have time. So I talked him into at least doing a phone call. So he came over to record that at my house in L.A. when he was out there for something. And just as friends, he said, it was before Horace and Pete dropped, and he told me about the whole thing, just to tell somebody, because it had to be so secret. So he wasn't talking about it. So he was so excited to talk to somebody. And he made me promise I wouldn't tell anybody. And then like a few days later, he's like, we should have recorded that. And I'm like, yeah, probably. But then he just said, well, look, I'll come tell you the story again.
Did it blow your mind? Because we were just talking before we got started. All the headlines that have come out from the Horace and Pete thing have been, here's a guy, we're talking about probably the #1 biggest comedian on the planet at this point. And he's talking about being millions of dollars in debt at the moment because he invested all his money. Did it blow your mind to hear something like that? Because you think of it, this guy's got to have $100 million in the bank at this point, but yet here's a guy saying he's millions in debt.
No, it didn't surprise me. Hey, Louis' always been like that. It's just there's a few more dollars now. But he's always been a guy that took risks and spent a lot of money on things, and like it sort of drove him. It used to drive him a bit, where he'd tap himself out and be like, "Now I got to work." So, but he's fine. I think that was mischaracterized by the press. You know, he has to go out on tour, and I think now that Horace and Pete's become public, now people know about it.
And the reviews were great. I didn't see it, but I heard it was terrific.
Well, it's a lot, and it's not necessarily uplifting, but it's certainly a genius piece of work. But yeah, I think that was overplayed a little bit. He'll be fine. Don't worry about Louis. He's gonna be all right.
Another person who I'm sure is going to be all right is President Obama. I remember when you land that interview. I mean, it's Obama. Like, who gets the president to sit down on a podcast? You've got to walk me through, how did that happen? What's your reaction when you're sitting down on a podcast opposite the president of the United States?
In my own house.
In
my
house.
garage.
Crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't never sought out to interview the president. I'm not that delusional. But they started reaching out at some point, about a year before the actual interview.
They reached out to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, someone on the staff was a fan of the show and thought it would be an interesting thing for him to do, which makes sense. It's got a certain audience. It's different for a president to do that. And so I had some fans on the staff, and they'd reached out and said, we think it'd be interesting to have him do it. And my producer, my business partner, Brendan McDonald, was like, yeah, of course. I'm like, yeah, right, that's going to happen. Yeah, sure, tell him yes. What are we going to say? No, I don't think so. And we just thought it was sort of like this weird thing that wasn't going to happen. Then they kept in touch over the year, and then it started to look like it was going to happen. So I was like, where are we going to do it? Do I go to the White House? Do I meet him in a hotel? He's like, no, he wants to come to the garage. I'm like, that's ridiculous. That's not going to happen. And then, it was like, it's happening. So a lot of things have to happen. Secret Service has to come over, check shit out.
That's awesome, dude.
I was on vacation the week before in Hawaii reading his first book to get in touch with who he really was as a person, because that's who I wanted to talk to, and had asked my neighbor if we could put snipers on his roof, and he was excited. He's retired, And so the day of, there's about 15 Secret Service people briefing in my living room. I have a 2-bedroom house. It's nothing. It's a little house. And there's about a dozen LAPD, and they tented the driveway and made it a carport and emptied the neighborhood of cars. And he flew in from Santa Monica to the Rose Bowl, which is about 5 minutes from me. It's funny because I was on the back deck with Secret Service, and they're like, we'll let you know when he's 20 minutes out. And we saw the presidential helicopter. And I'm like, I think he's close. I think he's right here. And then they landed at the Rose Bowl and met the motorcade there, and he came over, and we got right to it. But it's funny because it was, these Secret Service guys, they do this stuff all the time. And I thought my house would be difficult because I live, kind of on a hill in this isolated neighborhood a little bit. And they're like, no, this is easy. It's not as hard as Tyler Perry's house. He has an estate. There's 1 million rooms. This was a cakewalk. No problem.
What was he like in real life? Was he different, similar? From what you expected?
No, I didn't really know, I didn't know what to expect. You don't look at him the same as you look at a lot of presidents. He seems to be more thoughtful and human and earnest, and you don't know. I didn't know what to expect, and when he came up, I didn't see him because it was so hard. I was standing in front of the garage where I was instructed by the Secret Service. He was coming up the driveway with a bunch of staffers and everything, like all these people coming out of the motorcade up my driveway, and I'm like, where is he? And then I see a hand go up, Marc. And I'm like, oh my God, it's the president, Mr. President, in my driveway. How are you? And he's just like, we're gonna have a good time, right? And I'm like, we'll see. I hope so, And but he was very, disarming, and it made me feel very comfortable very quickly. And I think it's just something he's naturally does. He's a very grounded, very human guy.
How do you prepare for interviews? Doing this for a living, you do this for a living. I'm always curious people's preparation process. I ad-lib everything. I do my research, but then it's an ad-lib conversation. How do you prep?
Well, yeah, I mean, I get, usually I know the person who's coming, and I try to get a sense of who they are.
Yeah, yeah, Obama might be coming.
Yeah, I think I should maybe do some research. I know I'll look around, I'll poke around a little bit to make sure I know, what they're coming, for, because a lot of times, even though we don't do press interviews per se, sometimes the only time you can get people is when they're out pitching them. But I try to get a sense of who they are and where they come from as people. And then kind of just, make a couple of notes about things that interest me about their work or who they are. And then I just hope that the conversation takes off. And I don't know what's going to happen. That's the best.
You look at comedians now. It is such a different world. I look at your generation, the Seinfelds, the Jon Stewarts.
They're a little older than me. John's my age. Jerry's a little ahead.
Jerry is a little ahead.
Yeah.
Man, Jerry's a man, though. But when you look at how all of you guys had to kind of come up through the touring and the comedy clubs, and then you see the social media now propelling a whole different type of comedian.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on what's going on right now?
I don't know what's going on right now. But I mean, I understand what you're saying. But I mean, I only see comics, like if I go to the Comedy Store and there's some new guys working, new women working, I'll check them out. But I don't necessarily, like sometimes I'll see stuff on social media, but generally I don't really know what's going on. And hopefully I'm pleasantly surprised by new acts. They're young guys that are good and they're funny and I like them, but I don't really know what's going on.
You just had Julia Louis-Dreyfus on the show as well. She's JLD's one of my favorites.
Love her.
What makes someone like her or Seinfeld or Louis great? Like, how do they become the greatness that they are?
I don't know. It's very different people. Julia Louis-Dreyfus just happens to be an incredibly talented and gifted comic actress. So I imagine with somebody like her, depending whether she's creating or not creating, it's really about her instincts. I mean, she's just always been, incredibly funny. So I can't really tell you what makes a funny person, but she has incredible instincts just naturally. And she's fundamentally a comedic actress, which is a little different. Jerry just, worked really hard and, figured out exactly, what he did as a stand-up, and he created his own sort of strange hook and style. And Louis is something else. I've known Louis a long time, and Louis just always had a very large sensibility about everything. And he's got a really unusual ability to commit to things that would seem stupid and ridiculous, just as undertakings. Than most people, which I think is really the core of his particular genius. He doesn't filter himself much, and he's really able to follow things through, and it's usually something completely unique.
When you look at your own career, TV
you want
show.
to talk about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. You get TV show, hit podcast. Do you look at it and say, all right, I've made it and things are great, or is there a fear every single day that things could be taken away?
Well, that's getting less now, because I have earned a bit of money. I'm not Louis, I'm not Seinfeld, but, I'm not crazy either. I live fairly modestly. So some of that fear of it being taken away has been alleviated. And, I keep working, I keep doing the podcast, but I would like to know how to enjoy myself. Do you know?
How to enjoy myself?
Yeah.
I do, but I can't enjoy myself the way I want to enjoy myself. I need Louis C.K. money to enjoy myself the way I want to enjoy myself.
I think I can enjoy myself very simply. I'm just trying to focus a little on that, about what to do now after a life of struggle to get someplace. And now I'm realizing I'm at an age where I'm like, well, I'm doing okay and I've gotten someplace. So what do I like to do? And then it's figuring that stuff out.
That can become self-destructive, though. I mean, you can turn into partying, drugs,
That's
whatever.
not going to happen. Now, I'm sober, so that's not going to happen. I like to eat, but I got to be careful. I seem to be buying a lot of vinyl records now. I like that. I like to play guitar. I like to cook. It hasn't been too dangerous. I bought a modest car because not a car guy. I didn't want to worry about the car. So I bought a new car, but I bought a Camry hybrid. So I'm not really going crazy, but I'd maybe travel maybe a little bit.
Do you want superstardom? Do you want to?
No, I think that I guess I'm getting exactly what I can handle. Without bringing any supernatural entity into it. I'm not going to say God gives you what you can handle. But no, I see how other those guys live. My success is sort of really. I'm in pretty much complete creative control over it, so I know that the people that know me. I can be proud of what I've done, and a lot of people listen to the podcast have fairly deep relationship with me because I'm pretty candid on there. So I don't really want to be a person that can't leave their house.
How important is that creative control for a comedian? How important is it to be the captain of your own ship?
Well, for me, like the podcast, it's really just me and Brendan McDonald. It's 50-50 thing. He produces, I do the thing. It's great. It's not something, being a small businessman was not something we ever set out to do. And there was really no way to make money on a podcast when we started. So that experience with the two of us coming into this and really sort of being able to take pride and ownership of what we've achieved has been an amazing thing. He just bought his first house, which is I'm very proud of my
More than 2
business.
bedrooms?
Yeah. Proud of my business partner that his wife is going so well. Because when he decided to come on full with me, I was like, are you sure? I don't know, I don't know if I want that responsibility. He's like, no, we got it. But the TV show IFC has been very generous in letting us do what we want to do. So I don't know any other way. I've worked long and hard to get here. And with stand-up's always really up to you. But it has been sort of amazing to not have to compromise too much, creative things, to achieve what I've achieved. I'm happy. I'm grateful that it happened that way. I know a lot of people that didn't happen that way for.
Which do you enjoy the most, the touring, the podcast, or the TV show?
TV show is a great experience, and I think we did a great thing this new season. The 4th season of Marin is pretty astounding. So I enjoy doing that. I'd never done it before. I don't know what my future in television is necessarily. Like I feel like I've achieved it. Like I always wanted to have my own show, and I've done 4 seasons of one, and I'm proud of it. But I don't know what happens now with that. The podcast is ongoing, and I'm always excited to talk to people. I'm not sick of it. I may get a little bit of anxiety before I talk to people, but once I'm in it, always, yeah. But like once I'm in it, I'm like, oh, this is good. I'm glad I talked to this guy. And stand-up, the only aggravating thing about stand-up is like, when you got to generate a new hour of material, there's always that sort of like, I don't even know if I have it in me. But, I've done like 5 or 6 hours of material that's out there in the world. I imagine it'll come. But I like doing the performing too. I like them all for different reasons.
Do you look at social media? Because you're very active on social media.
Just on Twitter, really.
How do you look at it? Is that kind of your communication with fans, communication with other people? How do you use it?
Well, I think originally, once I built up a following on there, it was a way really to make sure that people knew what you were doing because, it's a big media landscape out there, and a lot of people just don't even know who I am or don't know the show's on or don't know. There's a lot to take someone's attention towards what you want them to be. Your stuff it's hard,
It is.
And, then I get kind of caught up with Twitter, and now I'm sort of starting to detach from it a little bit. It's hard not to feel dirty when you start getting mad or
I love your Twitter wars, by the way. They're the best.
I always feel bad. But, I mean, they happen.
They're awesome.
I seem to lose a lot.
No, but they're just hilarious. It's like the funniest thing that you have,
Me
known
freaking out.
personalities battling each other on Twitter. It's like a boxing match.
Yeah. I always lose, kind of, because I take it too personally. Like if I'm with Michael Ian Black or Pat.
That was a good one.
Yeah. Well, he's just playing a character, and I'm actually getting mad. So.
It's funny because I've interviewed him so many times, and he's like the driest dude. Even in real life, though, the shtick is there. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. No, we worked well together.
I love it. When you look at, kind of the next steps of your life, the 5, 10, 15 years, where do you see Marc Maron?
Hopefully alive. I'd like to do some more acting, and I'd like to sort of keep doing new things with the podcast and stand-up. So, I'd like to somehow focus on enjoying what I'm doing. That would be good, and it's sort of starting to happen.
Your dream guest on the podcast is?
Well, I think I need to talk to Albert Brooks. I'd like to talk to Carol Burnett. There's a lot of people. I find good conversations in almost everybody I talk to.
Dude, congratulations on everything you've achieved. It really is awesome to see, and season 4 looks like it's going to be really great. First 3 were really great. I love the characters. So
thank you so much.